Chapter 3. The Haunted Grave. After that, Hu Guohua joined the army and was quite valued. However, those were chaotic times. Warlord battles were common. With 100 or so followers, one could rule a territory. Today you vanquish me, tomorrow another takes you down. Few forces could endure for long. The warlord that Hu Guohua had served was not among the mighty and, within a year, his forces were decimated by rival factions. The troops dispersed, and the warlord who had promoted Hu Guohua perished in the conflict. Following the defeat, Hu Guohua returned to his native home, only to find his dilapidated house had collapsed. Fleeing in such haste, he had no money and hadn't eaten in 2 days. His addiction to opium flared up, leaving him desperate. He resorted to selling his handgun to bandits for some opium and food to stave off his immediate crises. Reflecting on his plight, he knew it wasn't sustainable. The scant supply of food and opium would last only 3 to 5 days at best. What then? It was then he remembered the ghost in the paper woman's body's words about going to a lonely grave without a tombstone in the barren cemetery at the 13th shop, where her burial treasures lay. Now a battle-hardened soldier, Hu Guohua found courage that he had lacked before. While in the army, he had heard many tales of grave robbing. It promised quick wealth, but was also punishable by death if caught. Thus, he did not dare act during the day. Steeling his nerves one night, under a faint moonlight, he lit a lantern, shouldered a shovel, and made his way to the graves at the 13th shop. A friend asked, "What is a faint moonlight?" It refers to a night where the moon is out, but its light is dim and hazy. Nowadays, we know this as a halo around the moon, a meteorological phenomenon indicating changing weather conditions, possibly foreshadowing strong winds. But in the rural areas of those times, who understood these scientific explanations? Some country folk referred to such a moon as having grown hairy. Others said that on such dimly lit nights, lonely spirits and ghosts were fond of wandering about. Upon arrival, Hu Guohua fortified himself with half a bottle of the strong liquor for bravery. That night, under the cold moon and stars, the chilly wind whistled by as wisps of ghostly phosphorescent light drifted among the graves. Eerie cries of strange birds punctuated the silence, and the light from his lantern flickered, threatening to extinguish at any moment. Even though he had fortified himself with alcohol, Hu Guohua was sweating cold bullets, literally sweating out all the alcohol he had drunk in the chilling atmosphere of this ghastly place. The cemetery was wild and unkempt, its occupants and their era unknown, entirely deserted, with no worry of being heard or seen. To bolster his courage, Hu Guohua tried singing some folk songs. But he quickly ran out of lyrics and resorted to singing his most familiar vulgar songs instead. Approaching the center of this vast graveyard, he found as expected an unmarked solitary grave, distinct from the rest. Oddly, the grave's coffin was not interred, but instead half-buried vertically, protruding from the mound. The coffin was new and polished, coated with 18 layers of red lacquer, reflecting an eerie glow under the moon. Hu Guohua was puzzled. Why was the coffin placed like this? Despite his apprehensions, he thought it foolish to come all this way and not look inside. Rationally, starving to death was no better than dying from opium withdrawal. Both were certain deaths. Given the choice, he thought he'd prefer falling prey to a ghost. "I've endured enough indignities in life," he muttered to himself. "Today, I follow this path into the dark." With his mind set, he began to dig, uncovering the entire coffin. His strength waning, the opium-addicted Hu Guohua was quickly exhausted by the effort. Taking a moment to rest, he inhaled some of his carried opium paste and felt invigorated enough to pry open the coffin lid. Inside was a stunningly beautiful woman, appearing lifelike despite the lavish layer of powder on her face and the overly red cheeks resembling glued-on plasters. Clothed in phoenix coronet and robe, draped in red silk auspicious dress, she lay as if a bride waiting on her wedding day. This corpse was certainly not the wide-faced paper woman he remembered, and surely after 2 years, even assuming she had been freshly buried, she should have decomposed. Could she have become a zombie? At that moment, however, Hu Guohua couldn't care less about such possibilities. His eyes were fixed on the jewelry adorning the corpse, sparkling temptingly under his lantern light. the wrapped silver ingots beside her, and numerous gold bars. More wealth than he could possibly count. Hu Guohua's glimpse of fortune rapidly turned into a nightmare. He reached to remove the emerald ring from the corpse's hand when the body suddenly moved. Its arm flipped over, grabbing Hu Guohua's wrist with a grip of iron. The long, claw-like nails sinking deep into his flesh, rendering him unable to escape. The corpse's eyes snapped open, projecting a chilling glow. The sheer cold that emanated from her gaze made Hu Guohua shiver violently, his breath visible like vapor. With a sneer, the corpse mocked Hu Guohua for his greed, deeming his heart and liver useless and claiming them as her own. Panicked by the threat to his vital organs, Hu Guohua attempted to protest, but the corpse quickly silenced him. Ripping away his clothes and slashing across his chest with her nails, his heart leapt out. The corpse snatched it and swallowed it whole, blood and all, without chewing. Shocked, Hu Guohua looked down to see a scar on his chest, not feeling any pain but sensing his consciousness fading. Confused, he couldn't recall what had just transpired and began kowtowing to the corpse repeatedly. The corpse perched atop her vertical coffin, coldly telling Hu Guohua that he was now her puppet. She promised him wealth and luxury in exchange for bringing her the hearts and livers of 64 women to consume. If he failed, his life would be forfeit. It turned out that the female corpse was a centennial corpse demon who, to avoid her predestined calamity, could not leave the place where she hid. She had lured people like Hu Guohua to her grave, to then coerce them into capturing innocent women for her to feed on their hearts. Once she consumed the hearts and livers of 64 women, even the descent of immortals would not be able to oppose her. Frightened to his core, Hu Guohua hurried away from the graveyard, terrified to the point of losing control of his bodily functions. After retrieving and changing into a pair of pants he had stolen from a neighbor's line, he wondered desperately where he could find women to satiate the ghoul who had taken something essential from him. Something so important he couldn't remember what it was, but knew he couldn't survive without complying. His mind raced with depraved ideas. In a fight for survival, unfortunately, his conscience seemed a small price to pay. Although the word conscience left him feeling oddly ill at ease, the primary goal was to cling to life by any means, however immoral it might seem. The next morning, Hu Guohua first exchanged the gold bars for silver dollars in the county town, and then indulged himself in an opium den, smoking to his heart's content. Afterward, he spent 10 silver dollars to buy a 17 or 18-year-old girl in a poor village. Although the sale of human beings was officially prohibited during the early years of the Republic, poverty led many common folk to sell their children, a lamentable occurrence widely uncontrolled by the government, rendering the law effectively inoperative. Hu Guohua led the young girl away, assuring her that he had purchased her to be his wife and that she need not worry. He promised her a life of luxury and comfort with him. The girl, named Xiao Chui, shy and unused to such attention, blushed and kept her gaze down, silently following Hu. Mounting the young girl on a small donkey, Hu Guohua hurried to the desolate graveyard at the 13th shop under the cover of a dark and windy night. The rugged mountain paths made the journey arduous, but Hu Guohua, concerned with timing, hastened their pace. Along the way, they encountered a renowned geomancer, known throughout the province as Master Thun. He was reputed to have the ability to see the spirits and could divine one's destiny by interpreting the balance of yin and yang and manipulating the 5 elements. Upon seeing Hu Guohua, Master Thun noticed an ominous shadow hanging over him. After a quick calculation, Master Thun was alarmed and urgently inquired about Hu's hurried journey. Hu Guohua irritably responded he had urgent business, telling the geomancer not to block his path. However, Master Thun forcefully demanded to know where Hu Guohua's heart and liver had gone. Startled by this revelation, Hu Guohua collapsed to his knees and begged for Master Thun's assistance. The master helped him to his feet and assured him that despite his moral failings, he could be saved, provided he took Master Thun as his teacher and renounced his addiction to opium. Considering the choice between his life and his addiction, Hu Guohua reluctantly realized that his life was indeed more valuable. Although he privately planned to resume his opium use once rid of the corpse demon's entanglement and Master Thun's watchful eye, he outwardly agreed to follow the teachings of his new master. On that mountainous path, Hu Guohua kowtowed to Master Sun, formally becoming his disciple. Master Thun took charge of the situation, instructing Hu on what to do while he followed at a distance, ready to intervene for protection. As the moon reached its zenith, Hu Guohua, accompanied by Xiao Chui, hurried to the desolate graves at the 13th shop. The female corpse had been waiting for a long time, and she wasted no time in rebuking Hu Guohua before seizing Xiao Chui, extracting her heart and liver with clawed hands, and consuming them greedily. The corpse then let out a hideous cry and tore Xiao Chui's body to shreds. To Hu's shock, Xiao Chui revealed her true form. She was also a paper figure, a decoy deployed by Master Thun, while the real Xiao Chui had been safely hidden elsewhere. The corpse had ingested a heart made of a black donkey's hoof, which is known to repel evil and is particularly effective against zombies. Grave robbers from the Jiangnan area would carry 2 black donkey hooves as a measure derived from secret arts of Maoshan, which will be explained later. Having been tricked, the demon in her fury tried to lash out at Hu Guohua, but he had already distanced himself. She let out a mournful howl as her body and clothes disintegrated into a bloody liquid, soon leaving behind nothing more than a skeleton. Master Thun, who had been observing from afar, hurried over to search through the remains, retrieved a red pill the size of a chicken's egg, and instructed Hu Guohua to swallow it, effectively restoring his own organs. Together, they placed the skeleton back into the coffin. As they were sealing it, the skull suddenly leaped up, spewing a black mist at Master Thun, who had been caught off guard. Despite being struck by the cold miasma, Master Thun, experienced in combating the nefarious, managed to enclose the lid, secured it with nails, and then spun ink lines over it, sealing it tight with a black web similar to a Go game board. Having been exposed to the zombie's venom, Master Thun was severely injured and couldn't move after the exertion, so he instructed Hu Guohua to gather kindling and burn the coffin. Hu Guohua complied, setting the coffin ablaze. The fire roared and sent up waves of black, foul-smelling smoke until only ashes remained. Only then did Hu Guohua remember the treasures within the coffin and lamented the missed opportunity, but it was too late. He aided his weakened Master Thun, fetching Xiao Chui along the way, and they settled into Master Thun's home. Under his guidance, Hu Guohua's opium addiction was cured, and he was taught some basics of geomancy. Setting up a small stall in the county town, he gave divinations and read fortunes, earning enough to marry Xiao Chui and lead a decent, improving life, all the while grateful for Master Thun's mentorship. Years later, Master Thun couldn't recover from the injury caused by the corpse's toxic chill and eventually passed away. On his deathbed, he summoned Hu Guohua and, acknowledging their master-disciple bond, regretted not being able to impart more substantial skills. He bestowed a partially preserved ancient book titled The 16-Character Yin-Yang Geomancy Secret Art on Hu Guohua. The teachings, limited to certain geomantic practices to locate graves, were to serve as a remembrance. Shortly after, Master Thun took his last breath. Hu Guohua buried his master and spent his free time studying the half-manuscript left to him. Gradually understanding its secrets, he gained a reputation selecting auspicious burial sites for the affluent. His fame and fortune slowly grew. Xiao Chui gave birth to a son for Hu Guohua, and they named him Hu Yunxian. At 17, Hu Yunxian attended a British missionary school in the provincial capital, where his vivacious spirit and exposure to revolutionary thought propelled him to dream daily of revolts. Eventually, he left home to join the revolutionary stronghold in Yan'an. Hu Yunxian served in the military until the founding of the People's Republic of China, rising to the rank of regiment commander in the 6th column of the 3rd Field Army during the Huaihai campaign. After the Yangtze River crossing campaign, he went south with the military and settled there with his family. Later on, I came into the picture, born coincidentally on the anniversary of the founding of the army, August 1st. Consequently, my father named me Hu Jianjun, but due to the commonality of the name in my kindergarten class, it was later changed to Hu Ba Yi, a play on my birthday and in line with a certain joie de vivre, as my grandfather noted. At 18, our family suffered during a political upheaval which began with upheavals amongst the leadership of the 3rd Field Army and led to sanctions on those with improper origins, including my parents. As a result, they were isolated and interrogated, and my grandfather was paraded in the streets for public censure. His age and frailty notwithstanding the rough treatment, he passed away soon after. Despite a life spent locating auspicious grave sites for others, he was cremated, a witness to life's unpredictable nature. Our home was searched and ransacked thrice, stripping us of all valuables. My grandfather's antique collection was either smashed or confiscated, with nothing spared. The only item that remained was the half-book he had protected by wrapping it in oilcloth and hiding it in the roof of a public latrine. During the Cultural Revolution, the young faced three choices post-graduation: join the army, which was considered the best option; work in the city in factory jobs, which offered wages; or, for those without connections or whose families were targeted during the political campaigns, the countryside awaited their re-education. Although some resisted rural relocation and ended up remaining in the cities assigned to jobs, the decision was not without its nuances. That's how things were in China. It's hard to explain, and the more you live, the more confused you become. You never know the rules, and not everyone understands the unwritten rules. Too young and uninformed to understand the full scope of going to the countryside, my prospects for conscription were dim due to my family's status, and with no work arrangements forthcoming in the city, the choice seemed clear. I decided to embrace re-education far from home. Most from our area chose Yunnan or Xinjiang, but I opted for Inner Mongolia alongside my friend Wang Kaishan, known affectionately as Fatty, for his pale complexion and round figure. As we boarded the train, leaving behind the city without any farewell, the scene contrasted starkly with the warm send-offs given to those heading for military service. My only possession was the copy of the 16-character Yin-Yang Geomancy Secret Art, which had survived hidden in the latrine. I brought it along, unsure of its contents, but comforted in knowing it was a remnant of my legacy to reflect on whenever I yearned for home. That's how things were in China. It's hard to explain, and the more you live, the more confused you become. You never know the rules, and not everyone understands the unwritten rules.